I kept my eyes closed, my breathing slow, my hands folded gently over my chest. The old rocking chair beneath me creaked soft and steady, like it had done for decades. To them, I was just another tired old woman, drifting somewhere between sleep and memory. But I was wide awake, and I heard every single word. "I'm so sick of waiting," Melissa whispered, her voice low and venomous. "She's ancient. How much longer is this gonna take?" My heart skipped a beat. That voice, I knew it too well. Sharp, cold, impatient. Daniel, my own son, sighed heavily. "Keep your voice down. What if she hears us?" Melissa gave a cruel little laugh. "Hear us? Please." She barely hears the TV anymore. They thought age had stolen my senses. They were wrong. My name is Elellaner Me Whitfield, and I have lived on this land in Texas for over 80 years. This house was built by my husband and me, board by board, nail by nail, back when our hands was strong and our dreams was simple. Every corner of this home carries our sweat, our laughter, and our tears. And now, my own blood was planning to take it all. "We can't wait much longer," Melissa said, tapping her manicured nails against the glass coffee table. "I've already talked to the lawyer. Everything's ready." Daniel hesitated. "You sure about this?" She leaned closer, her perfume thick in the warm air. "Of course I'm sure. Tomorrow morning." She signs the papers. We move her into a nursing home, sell the land, and finally start living. Living as if my existence was the only thing standing between them and happiness. My chest tightened, but I stayed still. The rocking chair creaked gently, hiding the shallow rhythm of my breath. "She trusts you," Melissa continued. "She won't read a single line. You just tell her it's about organizing her estate. Old people love that kind of thing." Daniel chuckled nervously. "Yeah, she always trusted me." That hurt more than anything else, because it was true. I had raised that boy with my own hands, fed him when there was barely food for myself, held him through fevers, heartbreaks, and failures. And now, he was planning to throw me away like unwanted furniture. They talked about selling the ranch, about buying a mansion in Houston, about pools, luxury cars, and expensive vacations, all funded by my life's work, all while I sat 10 feet away, pretending to sleep. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that their plan was already dead. Because 3 years ago, I had made a move so quiet, so final, that not even God himself could undo it. Years earlier, after my husband passed, the silence in this house nearly broke me. The nights felt endless, the walls echoed with memories, and the people I had sacrificed everything for slowly turned cold. That was when I realized something painful. Family doesn't always mean loyalty. Sometimes, it just means proximity. One afternoon, I found a box of old papers buried beneath my husband's tools. Inside was the deed to a small, forgotten parcel of land in New Mexico. Land his uncle had left him decades ago. At the time, it was worthless, dry, barren, useless. But times had changed. Wind energy companies were buying up land for millions. So I made a call. Then another. Then another. 3 months later, I sold that land for $19 million. I told no one. Not Daniel. Not Melissa. Not a single soul in this town. Instead, I invested quietly. Renewable energy. Sustainable farms. Long-term trusts. And then, I transferred every last dollar far away from Texas. Hidden. Safe. Untouchable. And then came my final move. One cold autumn morning, I drove myself into town, walked into the notary's office, and signed away this entire ranch to a land conservation trust. This land would never be sold, never drilled, never destroyed. It would stay exactly as my husband and I had built it. Forever. But they didn't know that. They still thought this place was their golden ticket. And tomorrow, they were going to find out how wrong they were. That night, as Melissa poured wine and toasted to their new life, I opened my eyes for just a second and stared at the ceiling. Not in fear, not in sadness, but in calm. Because sometimes, the quietest people are the most dangerous. By morning, my body ached the way it always did when storms were coming. My knees protested as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. The wooden floor was cold beneath my bare feet. And for a moment, I stood there, steadying myself, breathing in the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Melissa was already awake. She always was. Not because she liked mornings, but because she liked control. "Good morning," she said brightly when I stepped into the kitchen. Her smile tight and rehearsed. Daniel stood beside the counter, scrolling through his phone. "Morning, Mom," he muttered, not bothering to look up. I nodded and poured myself a cup of coffee. The silence between us was thick, heavy, uncomfortable, but I had lived inside heavier silences before. Years earlier, this house had been loud, full of laughter, full of arguments, full of life. Back when my husband, Walter, was still alive. Walter had hands like tree root strong, cracked, and steady. He could fix anything. Broken tractors, leaking roofs, shattered spirits. And when Daniel was small, Walter would carry him on his shoulders through the fields, teaching him the names of birds and the smell of good soil. But life has a way of shifting when you aren't looking. Walter died on a warm spring afternoon, sitting beneath the old oak tree with his hat tilted low over his eyes. A quiet heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. Just silence. After the funeral, Daniel and Melissa moved in to help. At first, I was grateful. I thought it meant family was closing ranks around me. I thought it meant love. I was wrong. The first thing that changed was the tone. Orders replaced requests. Criticism replaced concern. Melissa hated everything about the house. The furniture is ancient. The curtains smell old. "This place is depressing." She began replacing things. My dishes, my rugs, my husband's photographs, slowly erasing our lives. Then came the comments. "Maybe you should move to a smaller room. You don't really need the whole master bedroom anymore. Old people sleep better in quiet spaces." They moved me into the smallest bedroom at the back of the house, the one with the cracked window and weak heater. They said it was temporary. It wasn't. And still, I kept giving. When Daniel's business failed, I sold 3 acres of pasture to pay off his loans. When Melissa wanted a new SUV, I handed over my savings. When their credit cards were maxed, I wrote checks without asking questions. Because that's what mothers do. We protect our children even when they are grown. But gratitude never came. Only expectation. One afternoon, I overheard Melissa on the phone with a friend. "She's just sitting on all that land," she scoffed, "acting like it's sacred. Once it's ours. I'm leveling half of it." Something inside me cracked. The worst moment came on my granddaughter's 6th birthday. I had spent weeks sewing her a handmade doll. Soft cotton skin, tiny stitched shoes, a small blue dress made from the fabric of Daniel's childhood shirts. When I handed it to her, her eyes lit up. But Melissa snatched it from her hands. "This is filthy," she snapped. "We don't want old junk in our house." And she dropped it straight into the trash. In front of everyone. That night, I cried into my pillow until my chest hurt. Not because of the doll, but because I finally understood. They no longer saw me as family. I was just in the way. The resentment grew slowly, like poison in water. They complained when I cooked, complained when I didn't, complained when I spoke, complained when I stayed silent. One evening, Daniel exploded. "You never let me succeed," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "You're always holding us back." Holding him back. After I had given him everything, that was when I stopped trying to prove my love and started protecting my survival. Late one night, while the house slept, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my husband's old paperwork box. Inside were decades of documents, deeds, receipts, letters. That's when I found the New Mexico land papers. And that was when my plan truly began. Because sometimes, the only way to survive betrayal is to outthink it. The papers felt brittle in my hands, yellowed with age, forgotten, but not worthless. Not anymore. The land in New Mexico had once been dismissed as useless desert. Dry soil, harsh winds, nothing that could grow, nothing anyone wanted. Except the wind. Energy companies were buying land like that for one reason. Power. Clean. Renewable. profitable. So I made my first phone call. Quietly. Then another. Then another. And within weeks, strangers in press suits began calling me back. They spoke carefully, respectfully, because they smelled opportunity. 2 months later, I found myself sitting in a glass office in Santa Fe, staring across a polished table at a man who kept adjusting his expensive tie. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "we are prepared to offer $19 million. For a moment, I thought my ears had failed me. 19. Yes. Mom. I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't react. I simply nodded. When do we sign? The money arrived in 3 separate transfers. Large sums draw attention, so I scattered it. Different banks, different states, different investments. Wind energy, green farming, water purification, battery technology, long-term bonds, safe places, quiet places, places Daniel and Melissa would never think to look. And I changed my will. Carefully, legally, irrevocably. Then came the hardest decision of my life. The ranch, the land my husband had died protecting, the soil that held our history. I couldn't sell it, but I also couldn't leave it to greed. So I gave it away. One chilly morning, I drove into town, parked beside the old courthouse, and walked into the office of the Texas Natural Heritage Conservancy. They listened, they understood, and they promised me one thing: this land will never be destroyed. That was enough. The deed transfer took less than an hour. One signature, one stamp, one quiet ending, and one powerful beginning. I didn't tell anyone. Not my neighbors, not the church, not even my closest friends. Because silence is protection, and secrecy is survival. For 3 years, I played my role. The harmless old woman, the slow walker, the forgetful grandmother, the tired widow. I let Melissa complain about money. Let Daniel talk about future plans. Let them dream about selling land that no longer belonged to them. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broke. They thought I was scared. They were wrong. One night, I overheard Melissa laughing on the phone. She's sitting on a gold mine and doesn't even know it. She said, "Once she's gone, everything's ours." I smiled into my tea, because everything they wanted was already unreachable. But greed doesn't stop. It grows. And soon, they stopped waiting. That's when the lawyer appeared. Carter. Sharp suit. Cold eyes. Careful words. I saw him only twice before that night. Once in the driveway. Once in the hallway. Always whispering. Always watching. And then came the evening they thought I was asleep. The night they toasted to my disappearance. The night their entire plan unraveled without them knowing. But they had no idea. I had one final move left, and it would destroy everything they believed. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window like nothing was wrong. Birds chirped. The coffee machine hummed. Biscuits sat warm in a cloth basket. Melissa had gone out of her way to make everything look peaceful. Normal. But tension hung in the air so thick. You could almost taste it. "Sit here, Mom," Daniel said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. The same chair his father used to sit in. The same chair I hadn't been allowed to touch since Walter died. I lowered myself into it slowly. Carefully. Carter, their lawyer, sat across from me, his briefcase open, papers neatly stacked, pen already waiting. Melissa slid the documents toward me with a sugar-sweet smile. "It's just a formality," she said, "just to make sure everything is organized." Daniel nodded. "For your peace of mind." "Mom, peace." I almost laughed. The papers were thick, heavy, legal language everywhere. They thought I wouldn't read. They thought I was too old, too tired, too slow. I flipped the first few pages. Standard wording. Then I stopped. Slowly, I lifted my eyes. "I won't be signing this." Silence crashed across the room. Melissa blinked. "Excuse me," I said. I repeated calmly. "I won't be signing this." Daniel's face tightened. "Mom, don't start. This is for your own good." I reached into my worn leather bag and pulled out a single envelope. Thick, official, stamped, notarized. I placed it in the center of the table. Carter leaned forward. His confident posture faltered. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The moment his eyes scanned the document, all color drained from his face. "Mrs. Whitfield," he whispered. Melissa leaned in. "What is it?" I folded my hands. "That," I said softly, "is the deed of gift for this land." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "this ranch no longer belongs to me." Melissa froze. "What?" "As of last week," I continued, "this property legally belongs to the Texas Natural Heritage Conservancy." The room erupted. "You gave it away," Melissa screamed. Daniel shot to his feet. "You what?" I stayed seated, calm, unshaken. "Yes, I gave it away. Permanently." Daniel's face turned crimson. "You had no right." "No," I said quietly. "I had every right." Melissa slammed her hands on the table. "Then where is the money?" "The land is worth nearly 200 million. I looked directly into her eyes. "There is no money." Her mouth fell open. "No money. Not here," I replied. I took a slow breath. 3 years ago, I sold land in New Mexico for $19 million. Both of them stared. I invested it, protected it, secured it, in places neither of you will ever touch. Carter closed his briefcase. Without a word, without meeting anyone's eyes. He already knew. Their plan was dead. Daniel's voice shook. "You planned all this behind our backs." "Yes." "Why?" I stood, slowly, steadily, and looked at them both. "Because you planned to bury me while I was still breathing." Melissa stumbled back. "This isn't fair." "Neither," I replied, "was your betrayal." They tried threatening, begging, shouting, crying. Nothing worked. Because law doesn't care about tears. And greed doesn't undo signatures. By afternoon, the news spread. A small town doesn't keep secrets. By sunset, everyone knew. And by morning, their world collapsed. Investors pulled out. Deals vanished. Accounts froze. Friends disappeared. Doors closed. They had built their future on a lie. And lies crumble. But the final blow was still coming. By the next morning, the entire town knew. In a place as small as ours, secrets don't survive sunrise. Especially when those secrets involve millions of dollars. Betrayal. And a public humiliation this big. The headline hit the local newspaper before noon. Elderly woman outsmarts family's attempted land grab. And just like that, Daniel and Melissa became the most talked about people in Texas. For all the wrong reasons. Investors pulled out first. One by one. Phones stopped ringing. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. Plans dissolved. The life they had been bragging about vanished in less than 24 hours. Then came the audits. Some ownablis their soul sent an anonymous tip to the tax office. Within weeks, investigators were knocking on their door. Bank records, hidden transactions, unpaid taxes, false income reports. Every shortcut they had ever taken came back to collect its debt. Their accounts were frozen. Their cars were seized. Their house went into foreclosure. And the friends who once filled their living room with laughter disappeared overnight. I watched all of it from my porch. Quietly, calmly, without celebration. Because revenge doesn't need applause. It only needs time. Months passed. Then one cold, rainy afternoon, I saw them again. They were standing outside a small coffee shop on Main Street. Zogged, shivering, holding a cardboard sign. "Anything helps." Daniel's shoulders were slumped. Melissa's mascara ran in dark streaks down her face. They didn't recognize my truck at first. But when Daniel finally looked up, our eyes met. I pulled over, stepped out into the rain, and walked toward them. Melissa's lips trembled. Pride and hunger fought inside her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single $10 bill. I placed it in her shaking hand. "Enough for dinner," I said softly. Then I looked straight into her eyes. "And don't ever confuse kindness with weakness again." Neither of them spoke. They couldn't. Because sometimes, silence hurts more than words. I drove away. And I never looked back. A year later, my life is peaceful. The land is protected. The oak tree still stands tall. The wind moves gently across the fields. In the house, finally feels like home again. People in town still stop me. They thank me. They call me brave, smart, strong. But the truth is, I didn't do anything extraordinary. I simply listened. I waited. And when the time came, I acted. Because getting older doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. You gain patience. You gain clarity. And most of all, you gain the courage to choose yourself. If there's one lesson my story holds, it's this. Backhand index pointing right: never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. And never mistake silence for surrender. Because sometimes, the quiet ones are planning the loudest endings.